Well, continuing on with the schedule, preview, and prediction videos, today we are looking at the Texas Longhorns. Texas last year had an unexpected season, went 11-1 in the regular season with the lone loss being to Oklahoma. They won the Big 12, final year of being in the Big 12, and they made it to the playoff. Now, they did lose in the first round against Washington, but overall exceeded many people's expectations for 2023. Now, a lot of the playoff teams are losing critical pieces. Three of them lost their head coach. Pretty much all but two of them lost their quarterback. Texas kept both their quarterback and their coach. Steve Sarkisian's still going to be there. Quinn Ewers is still the starting quarterback. So Texas really is going to retain a lot of its identity from last year. And that doesn't mean they're completely the same team from last year. They do lose a couple key pieces, but all in all, lots of talent returning and could very well be among the most dangerous teams when it comes to the 2024 college football season. Now, 2024 is going to be an adjustment for Texas for one reason. They are switching from the Big 12 and they are going to the SEC. Now, I know a lot of y'all say, well, they won the Big 12 championship. Yeah, that's fine and dandy. The SEC is nowhere near as easy as the Big 12. I mean, there's some good teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Kansas is on the rise. They also brought in Utah from the Pac-12. I think UCF may be underrated, but none of those teams that I just mentioned would be in the top 7 in the SEC. So we'll have to see how Texas does when it comes to adjusting to the new conference in the SEC. It does benefit, as we're going to see with the schedule. They did manage to evade most of the top teams in the SEC. However, does the pressure of being in one of the toughest conferences get to Texas this year is one of the bigger questions. We'll have to see. Without further ado, let's start looking at their schedule. Start off with a cupcake game at home against Colorado State. Easy win there. Colorado State, nothing really to write home about. The next one, though, is Michigan. And Michigan, even with the pieces they lost, is still going to be among the toughest opponents Texas has to face this year. However, if you watch the Michigan preview, you know I don't really have a lot to say about Michigan with this game, other than the pieces they lost is going to hamper them in this game, and I think Texas is going to beat Michigan this year. Follow that up, coming back home for 3 consecutive games. UTSA, which is Texas San Antonio. I think Texas should be able to get the win there. Then you remain at home. You play Louisiana Monroe. This is not 2007, and you are not Alabama, so you don't really have to worry about this game. I think you beat UO Monroe very easily. And then you start your conference schedule against Mississippi State. Mississippi State has been in a downward spiral in recent years. It started with the unfortunate and untimely death of Mike Leach a couple years ago. Well, actually, it wasn't 2 years ago. It was about a year and a half ago. But the guy they hired to take over for him bombed horribly. They fired him with like 3 games left in the season. And they went ahead and brought in a guy who has no experience as a head coach at any level. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to flop. Look at Kirby Smart. But with the team he has, there's really no chance he's going to succeed in his first year as Mississippi State's coach. Many project Mississippi State to be within the worst of the FCC this coming year, and I'm one of them. I think Texas should be able to easily handle Mississippi State this year. So you start off your conference schedule with your first ever SEC game, and I think you dominate. Then you get your first bye week. Remember the calendar situation with bye weeks, because usually there's only one bye week, but because there's an extra Saturday within the time span of the season, they went ahead and gave every team an extra bye week. Then there's not a lot on Texas's schedule that screams trap situation. But the next two games do. First off, you have the emotional rivalry game with Oklahoma, who is also moving to the SEC. Oklahoma, in their third year under Brent Venables, opinions are almost split down the seams. Some think this is going to be a breakout year for them under Venables. Some say no. They do have among one of the tougher schedules in the SEC. This game, the Red River Rivalry as it's known, is going to be played in Dallas, Texas. So even though Texas is officially the home team and will wear the home jerseys, it's technically neutral site. Oklahoma, even though they've clearly not been as good as Texas the past couple years, still keep finding ways to keep winning weirdly against Texas. I remember a couple years ago they were down big time in like the midway through the third quarter, but come back to win. And then last year you had an almost overpowered Texas team somehow fall to Oklahoma. I think this year Oklahoma is once again going to get the surprise victory over Texas. I know there's some questions about Oklahoma, specifically about Jackson Arnold, the quarterback. But I think as time goes on, he'll be able to set in. So I think that Oklahoma is going to get the upset victory over Texas. And then not to mention Oklahoma will have had a significant SEC test in the form of Tennessee before they even get to Texas. So in my predictions, you take the L, your first L of the season against Oklahoma. Unfortunately, you have to go from Oklahoma. Now, luckily for you will be in your home stadium. But the bad news is that it's the toughest opponent not only on your schedule, but quite possibly in all of college football, the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, normally I'd say Texas has the advantage over them with the opponents because of what they have returning. But you can say the same things you're saying about Texas, you can say about Georgia. Now, they do lose a few key pieces. They don't have Brock Bowers. They don't have Lad McConkey. They had some other guy who was a defensive player that got drafted in the first round. His name I cannot remember for some reason. But overall, Georgia is still stacked. They still recruit very well. They bring in Trevor Etienne from Florida. I know you probably laughed at me when I said bring in a running back from Florida, but he was really the lone bright spot of Florida last year. He now transfers to Georgia, which is going to beef up the running game. They still have Carson Beck as quarterback. Defense is still projected to be loaded, and they still, of course, have Kirby Smart, who some even said before Saban's retirement was the best coach in college football. Now he's the undisputed best coach in college football today. I don't think Texas is going to get past Georgia. I think they're going to lose that game. So I have them losing in back-to-back weeks. First off against Oklahoma, and then at home against Georgia. The good news is you get to go play Vanderbilt, so you go from the best opponent in the SEC to the worst opponent in the SEC. I think you should easily manhandle Vanderbilt. If you don't manhandle Vanderbilt, then something is horribly wrong. Then you get your second bye week after the Vanderbilt game, and then you go back home to play Florida. It's just been, I hate to say the word dumpster fire because it's overused a lot in college football, but it's a dumpster fire in going on in Gainesville. I'm not sure if you ever saw it, but the Jalen Rashada situation has now involved a lawsuit. Basically, Florida failed to honor a deal they made with a recruit, which caused him to transfer out, and now he's seeking financial compensation because of the screw-ups. The lone bright spot is Graham Mertz, but even he may not be one of the best in the SEC. He got injured at the end of last year. You lose your best receiver to the draft. You lose your best running back to the transfer portal. You did bring in a decent recruiting class, but that's not really going to help you until at least 2024. And by then, I think Napier, who is the head coach of Florida, is going to be gone. Heck, he may be gone by this point of the season when you play them. Either way, I think you dominate Florida. Then you play Arkansas, so another team that has another case for... That's 3 consecutive SEC teams you play that have a case for worst SEC team. You play Arkansas, another team with a coach who seems to be on a big hot seat. Now, Sam Pittman did bring in Bobby Petrino. Yeah, I know you just got flashbacks to 2011 when he was on that motorcycle/infidelity scandal. But I can say a lot about his personal life that I would prefer not to say on the internet. But you can't deny he's a good offensive mind. He did well with Texas despite having Jimbo Fisher as his head coach. Now he goes and is now an offensive coordinator for another head coach that's on the hot seat. I think, there's no debate here. Texas is going to run over Arkansas. Then you play Kentucky. Kentucky, a semi-reasonable opponent, but for some reason they always fizzle out late in the season. I think you should be able to take care of Kentucky. And then you play Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M, it's going to be... They bring in Mike Elko, who is the former head coach at Duke. He's now going to be the head coach at Texas A&M after they finally got fed up with being a consistent 8-win team under Jimbo Fisher and just being stuck in the mud going nowhere. They finally pay him, I think it's around $90 million. Wow. Shouldn't have signed that 10-year contract prematurely, huh, Texas A&M? Anyway, they hire Mike Elko. They still got some pieces, but I don't think they're going to be able to hang with Texas. I think Texas is going to get the victory over Texas A&M. So there you go. I think Texas goes 10-2 in the regular season. The 2 losses being in a neutral site against Oklahoma and at home against Georgia. Now, could I potentially see them going 11-1? Yes, I do think maybe they could beat Oklahoma, but with the pattern against Oklahoma where they just find, as long as Oklahoma has their head screwed on the right way, Oklahoma finds a weird way to beat Texas, or Texas finds a weird way to beat themselves into submission against Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's going to beat them. And maybe they can find some way to get past Georgia. We have seen Georgia slip up in these high-pressure situations like this. But I think the deck is stacked more against Texas in this case because they have to play the emotional rivalry game against Oklahoma the week before they play Georgia, which I think also hurts Texas in a way in the Oklahoma game, which I forgot to mention earlier. It is not easy to stay focused on the opponent you have to play when you know your toughest opponent is the next week. We've seen it happen way too many times in college football. Heck, last year, I can throw out one notorious example. Alabama, yes, that was aided also by some stupid decisions by the coaching staff and an absolutely raucous crowd in Jordan Hare. But you can also make the case that maybe Alabama may have looked too far ahead to the SEC title game against Georgia. I'm not trying to make excuses here, by the way. If that is indeed the case, Alabama should have remained focused on Auburn and then focused on Georgia after the game. But with the power Georgia, maybe Alabama looked too forward. I think the same thing's going to happen to Texas. I think they're going to get caught looking ahead to Georgia in the Oklahoma game, and then I think they fall to Georgia the following week. Anyway, that's my prediction for Texas. Tune in. I'm not sure if it's going to be at the late part of this week or the early part of next week, but we'll be rounding out the 4 college football playoff teams with my favorite team and the team that this channel is mostly centered around, Alabama football. And we may even have a surprise guest for you next week with the Alabama season preview, so stay tuned.